All right, here we are. Welcome to another one of the studies in Ecclesiastes. I hope you have a blessed Lord's Day, and I trust that even though Solomon was kind of soured on life at this point, that there'll be something here that will encourage us and bless you. We're going to be reading out of Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17. There's an author by the name of Tom Mullen that he wrote a book called Laughing Out Loud and Other Religious Experiences. And in his book, he has this fantastic illustration about our modern, I don't know if it's a modern, I think it's just a human desire to find the deeper meaning in things. I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of connected with what Solomon's doing here in searching for the meaning of life. You know, what is the true source of happiness? Because if we know what life is all about, then we can really be happy. And so there was this engineer and psychologist and theologian that were out hunting up in the North Woods in Canada. And they'd been trudging around a good part of the day, and they come upon this isolated cabin. And you know, the not really the law of the woods, but it's the common thing there for people to offer hospitality, and they felt like that they could use a warm drink or something, you know. So they went up and knocked on the door, and nothing happened. Nobody was there. And they knocked again, nothing. So they tried the doorknob because they're different. And it was unlocked. So they went on in, and they were looking around, and it was a pretty simple cabin, just 2 rooms. Really, I mean, they could tell that it was a trapper, and, you know, there was the stuff there that, you know, from his successful Johnson, all those kind of things. But the only thing that really stood out in the whole cabin was the fact that the potbelly stove was wired to the ceiling and was suspended. It was about 6 foot in the air, 5 foot, 6 foot in the air. And so they're all three looking at that, and, you know, I wonder what that's all about. And the psychologist, as he's looking at it, he's thinking, you know, I know what it is. And he turned to the other guys, look, here's what it is. He, in his isolation from humanity and spending all this time up here, has designed this space where he can, at least figuratively, go back into the womb. It'd be a warm place underneath it, and he can curl up there and find the peace and the comfort that he needs in these surroundings, you know, where there's just desolation everywhere, just trees and snow. And the engineer says, like, man, that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, that's not what's going on here. He said, all you have to do and look, and you can tell this guy, he may not be an engineer, but he's a smart cookie. He has figured out that by putting his stove up like that, he can really use the law of thermodynamics. Being up high like that, it's going to create convection currents, and it's going to easily warm the whole cabin. I mean, it's a fantastic idea. I never would have thought of it. And the theologian, you know, he's hearing both of this, and he says, you know, with all due respect, and whenever someone says that, usually means that there's no respect there. But I believe that this stove hanging from the ceiling actually has a religious meaning behind it, because fire lifted up has been a religious symbol for centuries. And so they begin to argue their points, you know, and they're getting more heated as time goes on. And after a while, the trapper gets back from checking all of his traps. Of course, he's surprised that these people are here, but, you know, Canadian hospitality, so welcome. And before he can really say anything, they all pile on him asking, why is your stove like that? Now, this guy spends all this time up there by himself, so he doesn't really practice using a lot of words, and he doesn't really need a lot of words. He gets really short and to the point, and it was this: I had plenty of wire and not a lot of stovepipe. And sometimes the meaning of life can be found in a very simple way without having to go all around Robin Hood's barn or trying to go through all the circumstances that Solomon's going through. Jesus tells us in John 10:10, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it abundantly. That's the whole picture. As I said before, this is really the key to Ecclesiastes. But Solomon doesn't know this, and he's not really got this wonderful relationship with God right now anyway, having decided maybe happiness would be found amongst the other gods that his wives had brought in. But, he's looking. Now, in the first chapter, he tells us there's nothing new under the sun. And by this, he didn't mean that there was nothing more to invent. I'm sure you've read about the guy back in the 1800s that was over the U.S. Patent Office. And he decided that it needed to be closed down because he said everything of significance has been invented. And there's no longer any need for a patent office. Now, this was before the telephone, airplane, cell phone, typewriters, you name it. All the things that we consider modern conveniences hadn't been invented yet. But he was pretty sure that everything was made that was made. And Solomon wasn't that foolish for being the wise man that he was. And sometimes he was pretty foolish for being the wise man that he was. But he observed that everything ran in cycles. And he's dealing with, human nature and the human desires and life in general. It just does. And quite honestly, that's the pattern that he follows, excuse me, in Ecclesiastes. It kind of follows in patterns. So, everything, there's a season, there's a time for every purpose under the sun. That's in Ecclesiastes 3, but that's connected with what he had said in the first chapter about everything running in cycles. And then he gets on the matter of working and laboring and the vanity behind that and ties that into connections, but he's not done with the circle. So he comes back around, and that brings us here to chapter 5. And another part of this aspect that has to be dealt with, he's already looked at wealth in a way, but if we're really going to find happiness, if we're really going to get to that level, we have to have the right perspective of wealth. We have to have the right perspective of money. And, the fact that it is a tool, but it's just a tool. It's almost an artificial construct, something that we use to make commerce flow. So here in this passage of Scripture, if you go to chapter 5, verse 10, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There's grievous evil in that I have seen under the sun. Riches are kept by their owner to his hurt. And those riches are lost in a bad venture. And he is the father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. What gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all of his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. The reason he eats in darkness, well, there's two. He works until it's really late, and he doesn't want to use the oil to light his house, See if that clears my throat a little bit. But anyway, so there's his picture. The one that how do you put it? He who loves money. Now, the thing is, who was the wealthiest man in the world at this time? There's Croesus in Mycenae and some of those areas, but Solomon was doing really well for himself. Really well. His income in gold alone, based on current prices, come to $330 million annually. Just the gold. That's from 1 Kings chapter 10. He also owned a large fleet of merchant ships. They would go out. They'd be gone for 3 years and then come back. And they'd be carrying gold and ivory and precious stones, linens, spices, and exotic perfumes. He traded with Arabian kings and noblemen from all over the known world. He built a great throne. This is also in that same chapter. And it's kind of interesting, some of the concepts that people have come up with to try to visualize, because it tells us that he had a rounded top, tells us it had 6 steps. It also tells us that there was a lion at each side. It was all the throne was all made out of ivory, and the steps would go down. This is supposedly him meeting with Queen Sheba, and that one, the artist was pretty bad. Those look more like chow dogs than the lions, and maybe they did back then. I don't know, as far as whoever the artists were that designed them. But these are all different visualizations of what his throne room would have looked like. But they said that it made out of ivory. It was overlaid with finest gold and had precious stones and all that stuff in it. The golden lions and the armrests and all this kind of stuff. And in 1 Kings chapter 10 and verse 20, it says, nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. Would have been beautiful. I'm sure. I don't know how comfortable it would have been, but it would have been beautiful. Also, in his household, all their eating utensils and all of their goblets, everything was made out of gold, a lot of it pure gold, because silver was just too base of a metal to use. It wasn't worth anything, and you got to keep up appearances, especially if you're the king of Israel. And of course, we talked about his horses and all that a couple weeks ago. You can go and look at one of the other videos and look at that kind of stuff. Now, it took a construction crew of 150,000 Israelite men, 3,600 supervisors, and thousands of foreign laborers 7 years to build the temple. But it took that same group of people 13 years to build his house, his palace, the palace of the cedar of Lebanon. If anybody knew of the value of wealth, if anybody knew what good it could do, Solomon would know. But here he is at the autumn of his life, and he's looking back over all this stuff and considering his vast holdings. And his conclusion, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Wealth it's a lousy way to gauge anything, honestly. It's a lousy way to gauge success. That's not really the major indicator. I mean, sometimes wealth will accompany success. And sometimes people, if they're really good in their occupation, yeah, they're going to get money, but that isn't or shouldn't be the only indicator of success. It isn't the arbiter of success. There's other things that are way more important. But a lot of times people just get caught in that single focus. And Paul, talking to Timothy, says something about the same thing as Solomon. In fact, he probably, because the scriptures that he used were actually the Old Testament. This would have been a perfect place for him to have gotten this. But in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 9, but those who want to get rich fall into temptation and are caught in the trap of many foolish and harmful desires, which pull them down to ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the source of all kinds of evil. Some have been so eager to have it that they have wandered away from the faith and have broken their hearts with many sorrows. Now, the word that's translated love of money here literally means avarice. And also, if you notice here, this is well translated, for the love of money is a source of all kinds of evil. It's a source, a root of all kinds of evil. It's not the primary one. So what is the primary root of all evil? Sin. It's the fall in the garden and everything from that point. It's the fact that and using sin in the strictest sense, that Paul, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And the idea behind that is missing the mark. And this is really the source of all evil, because we think that by doing the things that we do, even though it's against God's word, that it's going to bring us happiness. It's going to bring us joy. And then it doesn't. And money is just one of these things. And there's, tons of them out there. Note too that it's all kinds, but not necessarily all evil. People sometimes misquote this. Money is the root of all evil. It's not what it says. It's the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, but not all evil. So, you take all this together, and then also you have to keep it all in context. When people misquote that, they just use that part in verse 10. 10 is actually commentary on verse 9. I mean, look at that again. Let's bring it back up. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and are caught in the trap of many foolish and harmful desires, which pull them down to ruin and destruction. That's the major point. Verse 10 is just commenting on verse 9. So, if you look at it this way, it helps you to see also what Solomon's talking about here, because he starts off by saying, if you love money, verse 10, if you love money, you'll never be satisfied. You'll never be satisfied. If you long to be rich, you'll never get all that you want. It's useless. Paul says the same thing. People who want to be rich are going to be the ones that get the heartbreak and have it's a trap. It's a trap. The Romans used to say that desiring wealth or getting wealth was like drinking seawater, because the more that you drank, the thirstier you got. And it has to do with this. And so Solomon, in looking at all these things, gives us some good things to think about. And first is that an increase in goods or money can't satisfy. Because when goods increase, so do expenses. Again, going back to this passage here, the richer you are, the more mouths you have to feed. All you gain is the knowledge that you're rich. That, again, is Solomon talking. I mean, he understands this. He knows this perspective. We looked at it earlier in it talking about his court, and feeding them all the cows and the grass fed and the other and grain fed and the deer and all the flour. And I mean, it was ridiculous the amount of stuff that it took to feed his household. But the richer he got and the more powerful he got, the bigger the household, because he needed all those courtiers to take care of things and to run all that. And you don't have to have a lot of money to dream about having a lot of money. And in fact, the people that don't have it, it's easy for them to dream, but it's also easy for them to just sit around and not only dream about money, but then become envious of the ones that do, and you see people wearing t-shirts and having bumper stickers and stuff, and it says, "Eat the rich." And they're driven by this envy and this desire, but they don't do anything. They just sit and want. And they want to be rich like those people. They would trade places with those people. And they hate those people because they have it and they don't. And we see it in our society right now, and they call it privilege and all these different things. And, we just want to even everything out. Let's take all the money from all the rich people and spread it out amongst everybody so everybody has the same amount. And before too long, the rich people will be rich again. The poor people will be poor again, because it's the mindset and the desires that drive them. And Solomon says, the greater your resources, the greater your financial responsibilities. I mean, there's going to be tons of people making claims on those resources. And the other thing is when you have money, then your friends are going to expect you to live like you have money. And that can defeat the purpose. I mean, especially if it's a person that really wants to hang on to it. Can you imagine? I mean, he has to appease his friends. I mean, that he bought them, he's got to keep them, and so you get this vicious cycle that's kind of ironic, because the person that doesn't want to spend and spread their wealth is being required to spend and spread their wealth because of the people around them. Second, an increase in goods or money can't satisfy, because when goods increase, so do worries. That's also found there in that passage. In verse 12, workers may or may not have enough to eat, but at least they can get a good night's sleep. The rich, however, have so much that they stay awake worrying. Whatever the situation might be, worrying about keeping the money, worrying about making the money grow. I mean, there can be all kinds of things. But Solomon he's making a comparison between the rich man and the day laborer here. The day laborer, I mean, the whole picture is kind of simplified, but it's a good point. The laborer goes out and he makes his penny, which been what he had made back then, and it worth so much more. It was a day's wages. And he comes home, he's tired and he's hungry, and his wife has a meal prepared for him, and he eats that. It's not going to be much, because the day's wages doesn't really get a lot. But at least he and his wife and his kids, they're fed and they're clothed and they're housed. Who knows about tomorrow? But at least today, it was taken care of. And he goes to bed and he's wore out, He spent a whole day laboring, and man, it doesn't take any, but he's asleep and enjoys the sleep of the worn out person. Where the rich man, yeah, he works too. I mean, he had to get the money, but now he's having to work harder to keep the money, and he's having to worry about what people are trying to take from him and how he's going to maintain all of this. And he's constantly struggling with all that. He eats his meal and it's rich and all of that. So then probably on top of everything else, maybe he has a little acid reflux and worry brings that on too. And so instead of really getting a good night's rest, he sleeps like a baby, tosses and turns and cries all night. It's quite the comparison to the two pictures. And Solomon says, man, the poor guy is so much better off. But then he's a rich guy. And, people today would say, yeah, but that's the way the rich always see it, and it's how hung up on money that we are that causes problems. I mean, wealth is supposed to bring security, right? But really, the security that wealth can buy is nothing more than illusion. I mean, you can buy all the gadgets for your house, and that doesn't mean that people aren't going to break in and steal. You can have bodyguards, but that doesn't mean someone can't take you out. You can have the best doctors and still get sick. I mean, all the things that money can get you, there's things that can counter it. It just is what it is. Famous saying, but it's so true. It is what it is. And money really can't buy health. It can't buy true love. It can't keep us from facing sorrow and death somewhere in our lives. And to top it off, the more you have to lose. And that creates worry as well. Third, an increase in goods or money can't satisfy, because when goods increase, so do problems. Verse 13 and 14. Here's a terrible thing that I've seen in this world. People save up their money for a time when they may need it, and then lose it all. Some bad deal. End up with nothing left to pass on to their children. I don't know. Do you remember the Nigerian emails that used to get sent out? I got one, and it was like, "Dear Mr. Dillon, I'm whatever the name was, and I am a lawyer, and whatever the town was. It wasn't, always the state capital or anything like that, but it was in Nigeria." And he says, we've had a serious problem. There's one of our people here in town that just passed away, and he was very wealthy. He has so many some millions of dollars in the bank, but he died without a will. Now the thing is his last name was Dillon, and I needed to find somebody outside of our country so that the government wouldn't have any record of them, that could come in and claim to be this person's relative and make a claim on all the money. And if you will send me $1,000, I can get everything rolling and get the proper paperwork made and all of that, so that you will be able to come and claim these millions, and then we can split it. So if you will send me the money and all of the particulars of your bank account, so that we can be transferring the funds and all of this kind of stuff. And it goes on, and it paints quite a picture. One person that was a con man years ago, when he was arrested, said, "Well, really what I do is victimless crimes." And they said, "No, you've conned a lot of people." He says, "Look, I've never been able to con an honest man. The only ones that I've ever caught are ones that were trying to get something for nothing, that knew that there was something wrong with the deal and went ahead and did it anyway." And I don't know if that was the situation here, but what Solomon and Paul are both alluding to is the fact that some people's desire for accumulation of wealth becomes so great that they no longer account for all the risks. They no longer look at all the things, and then they walk right into the trap. And not only do they suffer, but their families do as well. And then to top it off, Solomon also says, we leave this world just as we entered it, with nothing. In spite of all our work, there's nothing that we can take with us. And so all the accumulations, and even if happiness were to be found in accumulation of wealth and property, the problem is that it's fleeting, and it disappears when we die. It's gone. We leave it behind. It's nothing that we can hold on to. This is why that Jesus says over in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 19, do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I mean, there's no doubt that this is the way that it is in every aspect of our lives. If we want true happiness, we have to have the right focus. The right focus is putting God first and His kingdom, and then allowing all these other things to fall into place after. Priorities, always priorities. And when we do this, when we put His kingdom first, we're going to accomplish a couple things. First of all, we're going to eliminate worry. So I still have some worries. Yes, but not the big ones that a lot of people are dealing with, especially when it comes to money. If we believe in the love of God, and we truly believe that He is concerned for His children, which if you're a Christian, you have to believe that. And it's the whole basis of what we're doing. You know, it's, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So there's the focus, and the fact that we're concerned. We believe that God loves us and that He's going to take care of us. So then we take care of what we can. And then we also believe that God can and will take care of our other needs. He'll take care of us. Now, we take care of today's needs, and then we don't worry about tomorrow's needs, because that's the future. It's all in God's hands. Second, we don't know about the unknown future, but we can prepare for the known future. So, well, yeah, but we're humans. We don't know the future. We know some. I mean, we got Revelation, right? Solomon talks about how that we come into this world with nothing, and we leave it the same way. And that's true. Cemeteries have always fascinated me. They're intriguing. And I've done a lot of funerals at Jefferson Barracks when I was connected with one of the funeral homes here. And you just see row upon row of these white crosses, you know, and each one of them represents somebody, and each one of those people had dreams. You know, they had plans. Some of them got to see them. Some of them lived their life to a ripe old age, but a lot of them, probably the majority of them, got cut off as a young man fighting a war for their country. And there's other places, Civil War battlefields, and of course all of those young men were killed that way. And I've been in cemeteries that have tombstones that go way beyond that. Oak Grove, I mean, it goes to the 1800s or maybe even earlier there. And you look around and you see all those things, and it's so cool reading the different things. But have you ever noticed that on all the tombstones, there's not one of them that says, this man accumulated this point something dollars. He had 2 homes and 3 cars. I mean, there's no list of all the accumulations. Our names, our reputation, our values, how we conduct ourselves, those things we can pass on to our families and stuff. But we don't take any of this stuff with us. That's why Jesus says that we're to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. That's the future for us as Christians. That's the known future. And we can prepare for that known future. We have the opportunity. And when we seek God's kingdom first and His will first, then we'll know that our future, however far out it is secure, that we've taken care of it, and we can have true happiness, not only then, but now, because of the relationship that we have with our Heavenly Father. There's where true happiness is secured. All right. Well, thank you all for meeting with us, and I trust that this has been a blessing to you. And I hope you have a blessed day and a great week. Thanks for being here with us.